From Bias to Equality podcast is brought to you by the CEO Magazine, Holman Webb Lawyers, and B2Buy.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast, From Bias to Equality. I'm your host, Sandra D'Souza. Thank you for joining us. Today, for this episode, we are going to have a conversation with Callum Laing. With over 25 years of entrepreneurial experience, Callum has made a mark globally. He's the founder of Veblen Director Programme, partner at Unity Group, and the former CEO and chair of MBH Corporation plc. In the past decade, Callum has been all about helping small businesses navigate the capital markets. He's held influential positions like the World Business Angel Forum, High Commissioner to Singapore, and Ambassador to DealGateway.com. Callum is also a best-selling author with 3 business books under his belt and a 4th one, Business Blueprint, which is set to release in Q2 2024. Through his media platforms, Asian Entrepreneur and Enterprises Zone, Callum has interviewed over 2,500 entrepreneurs, leaders, and investors worldwide. Hi, Callum. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast today. It's so good to have you.
Yeah, it's great to see you again.
It's good. It's so good. I know it's been a while since we last spoken, and I have been following your journey. And I know that I know you, but I would love for you to tell us, our listeners here, just a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your career journey. And I know you've given us a little bit of a bio, but just, I guess in a paragraph or two, just a bit about your background, like your 25 years in a really short amount of time.
Yeah. Look, started off as an entrepreneur, basically because nobody would give me a job, and
I know the feeling.
People still won't give me a job. So look, started off building companies. I was quite lucky to build my first company at the height of the .com boom in the telco sector, and that was very successful until it all collapsed, and that was a learning experience. And then I've been building companies pretty much ever since, and really in the last 10 years started to straddle the public markets and how we can help small businesses to access all of the capital in the public markets, because that to me seemed like a huge opportunity. You've got half the world's GDP is locked up in small businesses, and 90% of private sector employment, and you've got trillions of dollars sloshing around in private equity and public markets, but there's no financial product to connect all of that money with small businesses. Everyone talks about startups in Silicon Valley, but that's a tiny fraction of the global economy. Actually, the real economy is made up of boring, cash generating old economy businesses, but there's no financial product to connect them. So that's kind of what I've been working on for the last 10 years, and that's led to kind of a lot of boardroom experience, which ultimately has all led to this one defining moment of being on your podcast, Sandra.
Well, like you, I'm really passionate about small business, and it's absolutely true, because I always say the small business is the backbone of the economy, and you're absolutely right. And with that passion, I guess what I like about you, Callum, and I know I'm telling this already ahead of the time with the audience, is that you are, in a way, I don't know whether I should call you a futurist or more than just a thought leader, but you were talking about diversity well ahead of the time. So I'm talking about Elect Stars, and the listeners know about the Elect Stars, where you have the 4 criteria. And during your time at MBH Corporation plc, you said that you've already qualified the time there with Elect Stars with the 4 criteria. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I think my inclusion of diversity was basically born out of frustration at seeing overlooked talent, and one of the nice things about small business is you have a flexibility that big companies don't have. So, for example, very, very early on in my career, I realized there were these incredibly talented mums that had amazing careers, then had kids, and then couldn't get back into the workforce because the big companies that they'd used to work for wanted them to work 12-hour days and 6 days a week and all of that sort of stuff. And I remember writing about it at the time for sort of the small business owners in my community and saying, look, this is an unbelievably untapped resource that we would never get that level of talent, but as long as you can help, you said, like, I don't care where people work from or when they work, as long as the work gets done. And small businesses have that flexibility. And then I started looking at, well, where are there other pockets of talent that are being overlooked for stupid reasons? So I think that's kind of probably where it came from. And then in terms of boardrooms, I've found like most boardrooms are mostly men, and I've never, like, I just found it wasn't a conducive environment to good decision making. It was either all buddies, which was fun, but again, not the critical challenge that you needed. Or it just turned into pissing contests and egos, and so we'd always aim to have at least 50% women on our boards, for no other reason than it just got to better decisions. And then started looking, and I kind of probably could have done a lot more, and then somebody pointed out to us that even though, so as a publicly listed company, we were 50% women on our boards, but we hadn't done much in terms of other diversity. And so we ended up launching an apprentice program to bring on young board members, to bring on disabled board members, to bring on different minorities, to give them that experience. And that was a real eye-opener in terms of a really good solution for publicly listed companies, which takes away a lot of the risk of hiring the wrong board member, but gives you a lot of the advantages of having diverse thought and all the benefits that come with that. So and that's now sort of become a key part of everything that we do moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. And so you saw the benefits of having diverse boards in terms of performance and the skill set, in terms of the value that you get out of it.
Yeah, look, I think what tends to get overlooked in all of the conversations is you've got to focus on the value to the company. Like, everything's got to be put into that context. So for example, when we're selling, so I now train women, minorities, and first timers around the world to get their first board seats through a company called Veblen Director Programme. When we're positioning board apprentices to publicly listed companies, if I was to go in and position this as, hey, look, this is the right thing to do, I'm not going to get through the door. But if I can go in and say, look, over the last 12 years, there's been $20 trillion has been raised for ESG funds. And those ESG funds cannot invest in your company unless you have diversity on the board. I can help you access those funds by putting this apprentice program in so that you can show you're taking steps to get to that. What you're kind of doing is using what they want, which is access to capital, to put the highly talented, qualified people into this board apprentice program. And what that does is that gives our apprentices a year to build a relationship with the board members, because ultimately yeah, nobody actually goes out looking for a board member. It's all done through personal contacts and who you trust. So
Yeah.
as an apprentice, you've got a year to build a relationship. And what we do is, because their expectation of an apprentice is very low in terms of what they're going to be able to deliver. And then we train our apprentices to massively over deliver and to take on a lot of the work that directors don't like doing. So, for example, ESG reporting is a huge part of being in a PLC environment. There's no director out there that wants to do that. So the apprentice, it's a great project to throw at the apprentices to do, as is talking to investors, investor relations, those kind of things, which again, most directors are not very good at, even though it's a critical component. And so what happens is our apprentices are able to massively over deliver, prove themselves incredibly valuable over the course of a year, build these trusted relationships, and then it's a very obvious thing just to move them into a permanent position. And we've started doing that, but where we aim is, rather than the biggest companies in the world, which they're a tiny percentage of all the companies. So what we do is we focus on the smallest companies, the smallest publicly listed companies, the micro caps, the small caps, and then we can get great people onto those boards. They can then leverage that to get up and actually get onto the board ladder and get that much needed experience, which then allows them to sort of go up the ladder much more rapidly. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken.
No, that's great. That's great, because I guess what you're doing is like they're already they have the expertise, and they obviously have their own qualification to be on the board. It's just giving them the exposure and that network of connecting with others on the board.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely sort of a big part of it is board. So the bigger the board, the more risk it is for the directors to make a bad hire. And so what happens is directors become paralyzed by not wanting to do the wrong thing. It's much easier to hire someone that went to a school like you, went to the same university as you, went same three companies. And so that's kind of the safe option. And to be fair, the negative consequences of making a bad hire on a public company are very, very bad. If you hire somebody onto your board and they turn out to be useless or worse, disruptive, you either have to fire them immediately, which makes all of the board look incompetent, and shareholders hate that, or you have to put up with them for years, which delays everything. So that's why even the most kind of enthusiastic boards are kind of scuttled by this not wanting to make the wrong choice. Whereas what we do with the apprentice programs, it de-risks it and it kind of takes all that away. So a big part is allowing them to build that trust and with those connections over the course of the year. The second part is actually on the candidate side, is oftentimes we don't know how to package up our experience, our connections, our background, our unique view of the world into a way that adds real value to a board. And so if you don't know how to package that, you could be sitting there and nobody can see your values. Like if you don't know how to present your value in the right way, it's going to be very, very difficult for somebody else to see it as well. So a big part of it is getting our members to really get clear on understanding what boards need, and then how they can be a conduit to getting the end result. Because ultimately, no company wants to hire a board member. What they want is a result, and ideally the board member can hopefully get you closer to that result. So that's a big focus, is understanding how you get a board closer to that result.
That's very insightful, Callum, because I guess there's always a lot of discussion about diversity in boards and the importance of having that balance on the boards, but the resistance to that and the risk of that is not heavily discussed. The
Mm.
challenges and how to overcome those challenges, and they're real challenges because, like you said, if it's a bad hire, if it's not a great hire, the risk of that is it can be quite detrimental to the whole company. And we're not
Yeah,
saying, we're not saying that hiring diversity can be a bad thing, but a bad hire can happen to anybody.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's kind of easier to deride all board members as idiots. But the reality is that there's some pretty smart people out there.
Yeah.
But you got to understand the game they're playing
Mm.
and position yourself to help them win the goals that they're aiming to
Yeah.
score.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so with the Veblen program is actually quite
Hmm.
interesting. So is that like um is it similar to the apprentice program, or is that slightly different?
So basically, the Veblen program I set up about 18 months ago, and this will make you laugh. So I set it up originally for women and minorities to get board seats. And so I went out to my network and I said, setting up this program, I'm going to train you how to do it. And I'm not going to place you on boards. I'm going to show you how you can create board seats. And so I went out to my network, and the first 7 people that applied were men, and 4 of them were white. And I was like, right,
Okay, yeah.
kind of
Right.
tells you
Of
everything you need to
course.
know. Now I'm very pleased to say that that's changed completely, and we are kind of the United Nations now. We've got
Good.
members from all over the world. Um, but yeah, it was kind of a funny start to it. But yeah, so basically what I do is and I'm not the expert on kind of all of the elements that they need to know, but I bring in experts on ESG, on diversity, on investor relations, on building relationships with different investors at different levels, good corporate governance, all of these kind of things. So I bring in experts on that, and we put them into their own accountability boards. So each week they connect with their boards. We take them through a process. So the first process that we take them through is to start an advisory board for a small company. Now there's 330 million companies worldwide. Less than 1% of those companies have a board. And one of our mantras is never apply for a board position, because if you're applying for a board position, first of all, you're applying for that 1% that everybody else is applying for. Secondly, I just don't think as a board member you should be applying. Like you lose control of the conversation immediately.
Yeah.
You contrast that with going to a company and saying, hey, look, I would be willing to build a board of advisors for you. It's not going to cost you anything. It just give me and a few people that I work with around the world the opportunity to work with you and help you grow your business over the next 12 months. Now, that's a very easy thing for a small business owner to say yes to. It's basically an hour or two's free consulting every month. Plus, it gives you the credibility of having a board, which helps with investors and clients and everything else. And one introduction that board member can completely transform the trajectory of that business. So we get all of our members to go and set up a advisory board first of all, and then the next step is to go and set up an apprentice program for a PLC, and then we've had so just in the last week, one of our members, actually a woman here in Singapore, she'd been on an advisory board of a European PLC for nearly a year. And she's just been offered a full-time board position of another PLC. Another one of ours, an American member, again was a apprentice on a European PLC. He's now been the last 3 months, been working as a director of an American sports and leisure publicly listed company in the US.
Wow.
And one of the key things that we always talk about with our members is look international, because everybody else is focused locally. And actually, when you're focused locally, you've got nothing different from everybody else locally that's applying. Whereas so you're based in Australia, if you're applying for a board seat in Asia or in the Middle East or wherever, just by the fact that you live in Australia, you've got contacts and knowledge that nobody else in the Middle East has got. So by definition, you become more valuable to them, because especially if they're looking to expand overseas. So being willing to think global, and that's one of the perks of COVID is that now most board meetings happen over Zoom, so you can be anywhere.
I do say this quite often, that COVID it still is a terrible thing and terrible virus, but it has changed in a good way the way that how we communicate and meet and open up the world in terms of this online meeting, and it has become quite acceptable way of communicating. So just a few more questions before we wrap this up. I will ask you more about, I guess, how people can contact you if they're interested in this program. But just going back a little bit about yourself, because I guess I can hear the passion and your understanding the talent and the diversity. I guess where are the values coming from? Like, to me, it's more than just logic. Like you're saying, oh, well, it's logical. You have this untapped talent and to tap into it, and not trying to fit into an archaic system or very rigid conformity. Is it just that, or did you have like some sort of like personal values around gender equality and diversity yourself?
So I think hopefully I'm a nice person and genuinely want to do the right thing. I think what I've learned over 25 years or whatever of being an entrepreneur is that just doing the right thing is rarely enough. And so I think the difference is that I've kind of focused on saying, okay, look, if this is the outcome that we're trying to get to, to me, the fact that we're having a conversation about women on boards in 2024 is insane. But we are. So rather than kind of saying, look, it's insane, how do we turn it into something that focuses on really where the value is to companies, to get them to make the right decisions, even if it's for the wrong reasons. So I think that's kind of where being an entrepreneur has helped me to redefine the way I look at things. And so consequently, I tend to avoid getting drawn into conversations about kind of the values and the morals of it, not because I don't believe in them, but just because in terms of trying to get the maximum result, if for my audience of public listcos and directors that are under a lot of pressure and need to get results first, the minute I talk about that, they glaze over. The minute I talk about accessing funds, then I've got their full attention, and then I can then use that to kind of Trojan horses to kind of term I use to get to the end result. So I think it's driven by values.
I know. Look, I know that, and I understand, I guess, where you're coming from, because when you talk about like it's for the good, people do glaze over. And I asked this question because of my interviews when I interview for my book. The commonality of all of the CEOs who succeeded in implementing, like you, it didn't matter what background, their upbringing, the size of the companies, the industries, founding or recruited in CEOs, any of that. It was that their own values, that they believed that was important, and diversity brought good business sense, as well as it made sense, and that it was important. And so, that was my my question, to get that answer out of you. To see that, Callum, I can see that not only makes business sense and logic, but you felt that personally that yeah, it was a good thing to do. So got that out of you. So it was good. And so I guess lastly, because I know I can keep talking, like if what advice would you give to the boards or even CEOs, that if they want to try and incorporate a greater women representation in C-suites or boards, what advice would you give them to just get that started, to get them going if they're struggling?
So I think rather than put it onto the boards, I put it onto the individuals, because I think there's way more individuals that can add value than there are companies with boards that are thinking about should they do the right thing or not. And so I think the focus is for your listeners, if you've got management or leadership experience, and therefore you have got a diverse opinion, you've got an idea that could be of value, could be of immense value to the right company, what you need to do is package that in a way that makes it easy for those companies to come to get to know you and to trust you, and ultimately to put you on the board. And so I tend to focus on really simple steps. So in the book that I've got coming out, Boardroom Blueprint, it's really designed to take people through that journey of advisory boards and apprentices to the main boards. And we talk about 5 components that are critical for that. So building your connections, being very deliberate about building the right connections, getting that basic knowledge that is key. Like, how do you read a balance sheet? What is investor relations? What is ESG? Why is that important to companies? Because if you just turn up at a board and say, I want to change the world, nobody cares. So you need to be able to articulate in the language that boards understand. Building your personal profile, which for entrepreneurs like ourselves is kind of second nature now. We know that we have to do that, but for employees, and there's a lot of very talented, ambitious employees, they've built their personal profiles within the company because that's where it was valuable. Typically, they have a very poor profile outside of the company, and so learning to build that profile is critical. And then once you get onto the board, using those first 3, being able to add value is critical, because we don't need another generation of people that sit on boards and don't add value. We look for
so true.
People that can actually put all stakeholder interests ahead of their own and work through it from that perspective, and then leverage it. And once you're on a board, it's that much easier to get onto another board. And actually, if you serve on 2 or 3 boards, you can take the learnings from one company and apply it to another. And so it just sort of starts this upward spiral of value. But those 5 components are really critical to getting ahead.
Great advice. And like I said, I guess at the end is, if anybody's interested in the Veblen program, how best should they find out or contact you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's always a good place for me, and mention this podcast, otherwise, because I kind of get a bit inundated with requests. But yeah, if you do a search for Veblen Director Programme online or on LinkedIn, you can see there's tons of free content out there. And then if you want to join, we'd love to have a chat with you and see whether you're a good fit. And then the book Boardroom Blueprint comes out in April, and that'll be boardroom-blueprint.com. Excellent.
Well, thank you, Callum. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast and this interview. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been fun. It's always good to see you.
Yes, that's great. So to wrap this up, I just also want to take a moment to thank everyone for listening and to express my gratitude for following yet another episode of From Bias to Equality. Don't forget that you can get a copy of my Amazon best-selling book, From Bias to Equality, at any good online book sites. For every hard copy sold, $1 goes to Women Resilience Centre to help women transition their lives out of domestic violence. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again.
Today's episode is brought to you by our wonderful sponsors. Firstly, we're sponsored by B2Buy. B2Buy is your trusted business buying platform that simplifies and automates your buying process, helping you buy smarter and faster, giving you greater visibility and value. With 100,000 products in one place, B2Buy is passionate about connecting diverse suppliers with corporate buyers, so you can create a more inclusive business environment and buy better with www.b2buy.online. Our second sponsor is Holman Webb Lawyers, an award-winning and dynamic full-service Australian law firm with offices in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide. Not only do Holman Webb offer comprehensive legal services, but they are also a proud recipient of the LX Star, recognizing their commitment to achieving gender equality in leadership.
Discover more about their services, initiatives and industry-leading insights at www.holmanwebb.com.au.
Lastly, our sponsor, the CEO Magazine, is an iconic, global media brand that inspires and promotes excellence within the business world. It is a source of information, inspiration and motivation for the world's most successful leaders, executives, investors and entrepreneurs. Go to www.thesiomagazine.com.